Hello everyone and welcome back to the semifinals of the Magnus Invitational. We are continuing with the match Magnus Carlsen versus Ding Liren to see who will face Hikaru Nakamura in the finals. So this is game 1 and well, we're all very eager to see what Magnus prepared for Ding as 2 days ago when they played it was just King's Gambit, Vienna game, the H5 Rosolimo, a lot of crazy stuff. So let's see what he came up with for this one. So he opens with the d4 and Ding replies knight to f6. We have knight to f3, d5 by Ding, and now bishop to f4, still continuing to use his London system. We have e6 and now knight b to d2. He prefers this line than the knight to c3 one. We have bishop to d6 now, here challenging the dark square bishop, and bishop to g5 now. Here Ding goes back, bishop to e7, he doesn't want the knight to be pinned, and e3 now by Magnus. We have castles by Ding and bishop to d3. b6 preparing to Ke2 to the light square bishop, and here there is one game in the database where knight to e5 was played, but here we have queen to e2, and it is as of move 8 that we have a completely new game. So here Ding just continues, bishop to d7, bishop to b7, he wants to play knight d7, get the rook to c8, push c5, and play a normal game. But Magnus decides to go for bishop captures on f6, bishop captures and h4, the so-called caveman attack. Ding says, I'm not very impressed by this. He goes knight to d7. And here, Ding spent some 30 seconds maybe on this move, whereas Carlsen used up already some 5 minutes to get to this position. And here, Ding has to be sure that this is not an option, because after captures, and check, you do not go back and allow queen to h5. You have to go to h6, and then it's gonna be a wild game, but still black will prevail. And Ding of course knows how to defend these positions very well. For example, after g4 you're gonna go g6, knight captures on f7, a nice fork here with check. After the rook captures you're gonna go g5 with check, but after the king goes back, captures, and you don't have compensation for the piece. Black is very happy playing this position, being a piece up. So just knight to g5 by Magnus. Now okay, there is the threat against the h7 pawn, and Ding just goes h6. The h7 pawn is no longer a threat, and now, well, you obviously have to consider knight to h7, but then just rook to e8, and you don't mind knight captures bishop. But instead, Magnus goes for f4. He offers up this knight, and it's not really an offer, because if you capture the knight, then you have this tricky bishop to h7 check, and it doesn't matter if the king moves or captures. Then it's queen h5 check, king moves, and after this captures, you do not stop checkmate. If g6, of course, queen h7, then it's checkmate. So, after this f4 idea, Ding just continues with c5. He says, I'm still not impressed here, there's nothing going on the king's side. We have c3, strengthening the center here, and just bishop back to e7, preparing the knight to come to f6. And g4 by Magnus. Now Magnus is ready to go back with the knight and start pushing the g pawn. So, knight to f6, Ding just consolidates here, and a3 now. Improving the position on the queen side a little bit. Now that if black decides to push c4 or something like that, it will be problematic for black later on to push b4 and b5 and b4, and white will be able to castle queen side. So Ding just continues rook to c8, and now queen to g2. Preparing to push the knight back and then play g5, hopefully open up the g file and so on. We have bishop to d6 by Ding, and now knight g to f3. Now preparing g5, and here Ding trades once. C captures, and knight to e4, blocking this light square bishop, and there's always this pressure on the knight on d2. So Magnus continues pushing. We have g5, and Ding of course closes the position with h5. We have knight to e5 by Magnus, and now first knight captures on d2, we have queen captures, and now g6, and this is now a very solid setup. King f2 by Magnus, he wants to improve the safety of his king, and king to g7, not allowing any knight captures on g6 ideas in the future. And rook 8 to c1, now trying to trade off a pair of rooks along the c file, but also just claiming the c file. We have queen to e7, developing the queen, connecting rooks, and the queen to e2 now. Maybe with ideas of bishop to a6, trading off the light square bishop, although it's hard to say as this bishop is very good, while this bishop not really doing all that much. So rook to c7, black now wants to double up on the c file, and here Magnus trades once. We have captures, and rook to d1 now. We have rook to c8, grabbing hold of the c file, but now rook to d1, rook to d2, not allowing any infiltrations along the second rank, even if the bishops are traded off. So queen to c1, and here you don't want to allow something like queen to h1, and then you'll have to worry about any checks, the h4 pawn, and so on. So queen to d1, Magnus blocks and offers a queen trade, which Ding happily accepts. We have captures, and here Ding eliminates the strong knight on e5. Bishop captures, f captures, and now king to f8. Now Ding starts improving the position of the king. The king side is pretty solid, so you want to shift the king over to the queen side. King to e2, Magnus does the same, and now king to e7. We have king to d2, and here just rook to c7. Ding says, okay, I'm calling this a draw, but Magnus not yet convinced. He goes for b4. We have a6, now just keeping the pawns like this, and then whichever pawn Magnus decides to push, Ding will just block it, block the position accordingly. So Magnus goes for a4, and now rook back to c8 by Ding. And here Carlsen goes for rook to f1, saying that he's maybe interested in rook to f6 followed by bishop captures and g6, which means that he would maybe give up the bishop for these two pawns, then maybe the rook could pick up this pawn as well. And this bishop is, well, very poorly placed, not really doing all that much, so it might be worth a shot. Ding says rook d8, I'm still just gonna make moves and wait to see what you're gonna do, and Magnus goes for it, rook to f6, but the Ding doesn't allow it. Ding goes, if you go rook to c8, then maybe we would see something like this, but it's hard to say if this bishop can become useful, since there really is no way for it to enter the game. Whatever you do, you might even go for this pawn, and then it's, who knows what might happen. So Ding instead goes rook to g8, he doesn't allow this, bishop captures and g6 idea, and now Magnus pushes a5. We have b5, now the queen side is also completely blocked off, and rook back to f1 by Magnus. We have rook to c8, and here rook to c1. We have a rook trade, captures, and now bishop to c6. Ding says, I'm now ready to call this a draw. But Magnus not yet convinced. King d2, we have king to d7, and now king to e2. We have king to e7, and here Magnus decides to make a little joke for the end of the game. He decides to go for bishop captures on g6. So he gives up a piece, but there's nothing Ding can do about it, because Ding captures, but there is no way to get the king into the game, and there is no way to get the bishop into the game, because all of the pawns are on light squares, but there just wasn't a way for Magnus to take advantage of this. Of course, they played a few more moves, king d2, bishop to d7, just repeating a few times, king e1, bishop c6, king d2, bishop to d7, king e1, and here once again, and it was in this position that they agreed to a draw, or rather it is a draw by threefold repetition. So very exciting game one, the Caveman attack by the London from Magnus, and Ding not very impressed, but he just kept it cool and decided to draw the game with the black pieces, and now we'll see what Ding does with the white pieces. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Kevin J. Lebais, Charles McDonald, Giacomo De Liberali, John Hyde, and Nonstop Grind for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Magnus Invitational until it finishes. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your Saturday.